This is Dr. Shankopotamus. There it is. And we're going to be showing how to brew some beer this evening. We are going to be brewing up a culture, a starter culture for our yeast. And we're going to be brewing up a extra special bitter from more beer with a few changes. You want to get something like this. This stuff is really good. 5-star Star San. I've got a 1 liter Erlenmeyer flask, but you really should probably have a 2 liter Erlenmeyer flask. It just gives you more room. You can't get more than about 700 milliliters in here without it boiling over a whole lot. So I've already mixed up some of my 5-star here and just swirl around enough, a little more water, get it all the way up to the top, okay, to make absolutely sure it's clean. I've got a stirrer here too. I'll show you what we do with this later on, but you really need, it works better if you've got a stirrer. Okay, you're going to stir your yeast up better, you're going to get a better yeast yield, they're going to grow better, they're going to be happier. So that's what you want to do. Take your stirrer, drop it into your solution, because you're trying to clean everything out, alright? And then we're going to dump this out. Now they'll tell you that you can actually leave the suds and things in here. A little more water into it. Alrighty. And they'll tell you when you're cleaning with this sort of stuff, the suds don't matter. You can leave them in there. They don't mess up the beer or anything like that. Now, we're going to be using some DME dry malt extract, okay? Very powdery. My initial specific gravity on my beer should be around 1045, 1.045, 1.049. Mine's actually going to be more because I add malt to it. If you take a solution that's a liter and you put a cup of extra dry malt of dry malt extract into it, you will have a starter that's 1.040. So I go ahead and put 1 cup into about 750 cc's, and that's going to give me about 1.05, maybe 1.06, which will be fine for the beer that we're about to make. Alrighty. So you go ahead and get some of your water into here. You're going to take your Erlenmeyer flask and you're going to boil it, okay, right on the stove. Alright? Everything's good. I'm going to get a cup. You can tell we're in the kitchen. I'm going to get a measuring cup, 1 cup. It's much easier with this malt if you use a funnel. It doesn't end up all over the place. Alrighty? Over the sink once again, so we make as little mess as possible. But you can see how stuff flows almost like a liquid. Very fine powder we got here. And you can just get this right into your flask. Okay, let's got that in our flask. We're going to try to stir this up some. About 700. Okay. Now the other thing we're going to add that I think is very helpful is some yeast nutrient mix. This also comes from the More Beer people. This is their yeast nutrient mix. Just drop some of that into here. Okay. And then get us all shaken up again. Then you want to bring this to a boil on the stove. Try to prevent boilovers. And you want to boil this for about 15 minutes. And I'll tell you one thing that I've done. I've done this a lot of times, and this last time I did it, I actually didn't pay enough attention to having it all in solution first, and I burnt it. This is actually my second round tonight. because I went and burnt the malt, and it just adds a really bad flavor, so I didn't use it. So I'm redoing it this time, making sure it's all stirred up. All right, and then we'll get it onto the stove. All right, so we're going to start our eye up here. And obviously that's going to be way too much. You want to bring it way on down, and you'll probably be at simmer with an eye like this by the time you really get it going. You also want a mitt handy, all right, something, because the top of the Erlenmeyer flask will get hot, and it will get hot very quickly. All right. And if you start to have a boil over and you think, gotta get it, you reach over and grab it, that's the last time you're going to grab it. All right. Your hand will stick to it, and you'll be at the hospital. But we want to make sure that it's stirred up. Another very important thing, once you have your flask sterilized, like what we just did with a star sand solution, and once you've got getting your wort going in here, okay, then you don't want to put anything else in there. Don't take a spoon and stick it in there and start stirring with a spoon, doing something silly like that. Any kind of bacteria you get into this can ruin your entire batch of beer. Okay, it can ruin your whole beer. So you don't, now once we're going, you want to only touch it here. Don't ever touch the top. Some people put a stopper into the top and do that and then flame the top, but I've had real good luck and no problems with, I'll show you what, just using this tinfoil over the top of it towards the end of the boil. Let it boil a little bit up on the inside, and I've not had any trouble with bacterial contamination in my wort. So now we're going to let this thing boil. Once we get it going, you got 15 minutes that you want it to boil. And you can see we still got a few pieces that we want to make sure we get all the way into solution. Okay, so we're done with the boil. You can hear the timer. There's a 15-minute boil. And I'm going to turn this off. Get that alarm off. And you'll notice the last few minutes of that fast forward we did, I put the tinfoil on the top of it. That was about the last minute of the boil. Let some of the steam come up and really clean the top. Like I said, I've never had trouble with bacteria getting in doing it that way. There are some people who flame the tip of it with a Bunsen burner and put a cork into it, put a stopper into it. I just don't see all the hubbub. If you keep it really clean, Don't touch the top part with your hands or your mitt. Don't stick anything in there. Put the tinfoil on the top of the end. Let the steam cleanse the tinfoil or sterilize the tinfoil. You're going to be good. Sometimes we've been taking the tinfoil before and dumped the solution over the tinfoil and then put it on there. While this is cooling down a little bit. One thing that I forgot to mention, for this brew we're going to be using WLP002 there, the White Labs yeast. Okay, I took this out of the refrigerator a little while ago. It's right about room temperature, and that's where you want it. Okay, you want to make sure you get this out and it's at room temperature. You're going to take your solution here, your wort, and you're going to put it into the freezer or refrigerator or an ice bath if you want to. Cool it down just a little bit below room temperature. You don't want it. You definitely don't want it too hot. Let it come back up to room temperature. Then you can add your yeast. You dump your yeast when it's too cold. You really won't get any yeast growth at all. You dump your yeast when it's too hot. You're going to kill your yeast, and then that's not going to be good. That's not a good situation at all. You can look at the color that we got here. Like this top of this thing is hot. I'm not about to touch it with my hand, but you can look. It's got a nice light brown color. Okay. There's no areas of anything that's burnt inside of there. There's no clumping inside of there, and that's pretty much exactly what you want. I've got about 700 cc's in there. I think it's much better if you're pitching 5 gallons to have, you know, a liter, but my flask isn't big enough to do it. You really need a 2-liter flask to get yourself a liter of stuff. You saw how much doing this that it can boil over. So between 700 and 800 is about the best you can do working with this size flask. Okay, so we're going to head over here to the freezer, and we're going to get this thing into the freezer. All right. So we've taken our wort that we were going to use, or we are going to use. Okay, right here. For our starter, had it in the freezer, and trust me, it's back to room temperature now. In the freezer for a little while. I don't think it's been about 45 minutes or an hour, and then. Back out, let it sit till room temperature. At the same time, I've got my yeast here. Alright, see if they come up in focus. Shake it up real well. Okay, and we're going to pitch. It's called, we're pitching our yeast into our wort to make our starter. Okay, and remember I explained earlier that I dropped a stirrer inside of there, boiled it so it's clean, so it's sterile, and this is your stirrer. You get a much better result. Much higher yield of your yeast if you can have it stirring constantly. If you don't have a stirrer, you need to come by every few hours or something and just make sure that you're shaking it up and make sure you got it ready to go. Now the key is to get this into here without touching anything, without getting any bacterial contamination into it. And I'm going to give it a try here on live TV. When you first open it, it'll bubble a little bit. Okay, so you want to make sure it doesn't come spewing out on you because it's come back to room temperature. Kind of like opening up a Coke. You just don't want it to make too much of a mess on you. See how you can see it coming up there? Just I hope you can. Okay, so it opens up nicely. I'm just going to shake it again just to make sure, because when it lays a certain way you'll get kind of a cake of yeast in the bottom of it, and you want to make sure. Got them out here. Okay. Like I said, we're going to pitch our yeast and be very careful. I usually pull it out along the sides here. Don't touch the inside. Lift it up without touching the inside. Pitch your yeast in without touching it. Okay. Get the top back on it again without touching it, and you're sealed. Okay. You want to get a little shake to it, and right now is when you want some oxygen into it as well. So we're going to do that again. Not quite so violently, still not touching the inside, not flipping it over. Doing it quickly, trying not to let bacteria get down into it. Seal it up. And you're golden. Get our stirrer going. You can hear it from back there, you might be able to. You can hear the stirrer moving around. I just put this up on this piece of wood just to keep it off of my new table here that I've been working on, so it doesn't come out on the table. I'll come by and check it later on just to make sure. You shouldn't get enough yeast that it balls up out of there. That's plenty of headspace for the yeast to ferment. Okay, and we're going to let them ferment here overnight, and tomorrow we will be taking this and pitching it. Another thing to check is on your yeast. There's always a date. It says, see here, if you can see that, best before date. That one's going to be June 27th, 2013. I've heard of people using it later, but you might as well use it while it's still good. We're well before that date. Okay. And we're going to let this yeast start to grow and do what it likes to do here. And by tomorrow we'll have a full 700 cc's of yeast and a lot more yeast cells than what we've got just in this bottle right here. You can see how much we've increased our volume of yeast. The more yeast you have when you pitch, the better off you are. The faster your fermentation starts, the quicker that you make sure you're eliminating anything you don't want that could have gotten into the wort, especially bacteria. But when we go through the brewing process, I'll show you how to make sure you keep everything clean, and that's the key to it, keeping it clean, keeping all the bacteria out of it. Well, there you have it. And that's how you make your starter. Alright, so we're back out here. It's morning. I put this in last night. You can see it's got a nice head on it here. Krausen, I think it's called. Krausen, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure that you will. And it's hard to see on the video, but you can still see it. It is hard to see, isn't it? There you go. See the little kind of bubbles coming up? CO2. That means the yeast is still working. There's a couple things about doing this. There's some debate over whether or not you let it completely finish, or you want to catch it actually while it's active. You get more active yeast and then you pitch them. Let it finish completely, drain off the wort, take the yeast out of the bottom and only pitch that. Or wait till the whole thing finishes completely, then shake it all up, stir it up, pitch that. I've just pitched what I've got, and I've had very good results in the past. I've not gotten rid of the wort. Now, one thing to say about this wort right here, if you happen to be making a beer that is very very light, we call it delicate beer, you'd want to be careful about putting this in. This may actually darken your beer or add flavors to your beer that you don't want. So in that case, you might want to let it completely finish the fermentation, let the yeast settle out to the bottom, decant off the wort there, and use just the yeast on the bottom. So this thing's still going. I'm going to let it keep running while we head inside and get to start making the beer, because I could let it sit maybe 6 hours or so, but now's the time to make, so we're gonna get to work making. By the way, table, you know, like that. I didn't do the video on how I made the table, but it's a nice little Eastern red cedar table there, all hardwood. Yeah, solid. Pretty large chunks, pretty heavy. It's a heavy duty, going to be an outside heavy duty table. But anyway, tung oil, so it goes on top of it. It really helps protect it. And I'm going to put a layer of varnish on top. But that's aside from the beer. We'll get back to the beer here in just a minute.